Have you ever wondered why so many people believed Jesus when he taught? What was it about him that caused people to just accept his words? He was coming and he was preaching something that was brand new. He was teaching something to the Jewish people that was requiring them to turn away from the old law of Moses, or at least which did that after he died on the cross. Why would they believe that? Why would they believe Jesus, and why would they believe the apostles? After all, anybody can come and say anything. Was it that the people were just so gullible at that time? Well, I think we have one of the great keys to our faith within the New Testament Scripture as far as the clue as to why people believed Jesus really was the Son of God, and therefore they believed his teaching. And part of that is found in a passage in Matthew chapter 4 and verse 23. Our preacher at church preached on this very passage this morning, and it really got me to thinking about that. But in Matthew 4 verse 23, it said, "He went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people." Well, it was the miracles, wasn't it? Think about that for a moment. When I was a younger man, I had kind of a problem with the miracles because they were obviously something that was supernatural. And if it wasn't something that I could explain, well, I had a problem believing it. But then the more I got to thinking about it, the more I realized that it was only a miracle that could convince the people that the teaching really was from God. And miracles would be the only reason that you could really explain why so many people turned to Jesus at this time. There were people who left their life, their former lives. Some of them had very comfortable lives as Roman officials or as Jews that were actually Pharisees or Sadducees, and yet they left this comfort into a way of life and a teaching that was only going to bring them derision and persecution. When you look at the 12 apostles, nearly every one of them lost their life in some horrible way. What would cause a group of people to go into a teaching that was going to cause them to be in constant danger and at risk of their very lives, and eventually cost many of them their lives? And the only explanation you can give is that they truly believed what they were teaching. They first of all truly believed what they'd been taught by Christ, and then they truly believed what they were teaching. But why? And the answer again is the miracles. They saw irrefutable proof that Jesus really was the Son of God. In fact, God used these very miracles when the church was first being established and allowed the apostles to be able to perform these miracles as well. And that's why so many thousands of people immediately left their old life, whether it was their life as a Jew under the old law or whether it was their life as a Greek just under the polytheism that they were under with all their multiple idols and their multiple gods. It was the miracles that caused them to believe that this was the only way. And so when Jesus taught the good news, he also healed the people of their diseases. Now think about that for a moment. God could have used any kind of a miracle he wanted to, couldn't he? He could have created something like a big fireworks display or something that caused signs to appear in the sky that would be convincing, or cause all sorts of natural events like volcanoes all going off at the same time. But instead, he chose to use miracles that would help the people. When Jesus taught the people, we're told that he had compassion upon them. And then he used his miraculous powers to heal them of whatever disease they had. And so when people heard that Jesus could heal their disease, they brought not only themselves, but their loved ones to Jesus so that they could be healed. And then they stayed for the teaching. Because while you and I can wonder if a miracle really happened or not to somebody else, if you have a terrible disease and somebody just waves their hand over you and commands it to be gone, you know if it's gone or not. And these people, once they were healed of their diseases, things like blindness and deafness, there were even people who were raised from the dead. These would be convincing miracles, would they not? This is the only explanation for why Jesus' teachings and the apostles' teachings after him had such a powerful, persuasive effect. And then once they saw the miracles and stayed for the teaching, they learned from the teaching that there was something different about that. After Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, and we read it in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, at the end of chapter 7, starting in verse 28, it said, "When Jesus finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law." In other words, he wasn't just rambling along like men tend to. He wasn't saying things that could not be substantiated. His teaching had authority. And so after the people had seen the miracles and believed that he truly was from God, that allowed them to listen to the teaching, but it was the teaching itself that amazed the people because of the authority that he had with it. And you read the Sermon on the Mount, it's one of the most beautiful sermons, if not the most beautiful ever taught. And it contains so many powerful truths in it that if we would apply these truths to our life, it would change our life. Jesus taught with the authority from God. And so now, maybe that will help us understand. Why would the people accept the fact that he was the Son of God? They saw the miracles. First, the miracles of his healings of the various people, his miraculous feeding of many thousands of people, his miraculous raising of the dead of a number of people, and then after he died, he raised from the dead himself. And people who had witnessed his death realized that only if he was from God could he have been raised from the dead as he was. This is why so many thousands of people turned their lives over to Christ and began to follow the ways of Christianity. It was because of the miracles. And now today, we have the teachings. And if we're wise, we'll sit down and we'll study those teachings, and we will be amazed, just as these people were, by their authority. We have the proof of the witnesses. And again, some people won't accept that, and I understand that. That's something that's difficult for us to do, especially when it involves something like miracles. But think about this. When we're listening to a trial, when we're sitting on a jury, we listen to the evidence. And it's the most powerful evidence very often is the evidence from the eyewitnesses. And when you have a number of eyewitnesses that all agree that the same thing happened, this causes you to be persuaded that what they're telling is the truth, especially since they're testifying under oath, from which, if they broke that oath and they were to be found out, they'd pay a tremendous penalty. Well, we have the apostles, we have the disciples of the New Testament who witnessed the miracles that Jesus was performing, and then the apostles performed the miracles themselves. They didn't have that power before, but it was given to them by God, and it would have convinced them. That's why they were willing to teach what they taught, even though they were under the penalty of death very often for teaching that. They knew. And it is this witness that is so powerful to us today. Just like witnesses in a trial are so powerful to us, the witnesses in the New Testament are very powerful. Why would they have been willing to risk their lives for something that they knew to be a lie? Well, a crazy person might do that. But to find that many practical people going crazy at the same time, that's not likely. As a matter of fact, things like that just don't happen. Sometimes you find a number of people participating in a con because they hope to get rich by it or get power by it or some other benefit. But the apostles, the disciples, had no such promise of an earthly benefit. They weren't going to get wealthy. They certainly weren't going to get popular. All they got from it was persecution, yet they went ahead and taught what they taught. Why? It was because they saw the miracles and they believed. That's the only rational explanation for us today as we look at that, is to understand why they would do that. Because while it is true that people will die for something that they think is the truth, that they don't realize is a lie, you're not going to find anybody that's sane that will willingly die for something that they know to be a lie. These apostles saw what they saw, they testified to it, and then they put their lives on the line because they knew and they saw. These are the types of things that compel us today to have a faith that we do, that what they were teaching is true. And this is why we can go with the Christian faith with such confidence today. Why did they do it back then? They saw the miracles and they believed. Then they heard the teachings and they were persuaded. Now we look at that evidence today and we believe, and then we hear the teachings and we're persuaded. God's plan is amazing. If we can follow it, if we can apply these things to our lives today, someday we're going to have an eternity with Him. I believe that with all my heart. After studying the Bible for a number of years and studying other religious writings, this is the only thing that makes sense. It's compelling enough to me to make me change my life. How about you? That's a lesson for today. It's something to think about. I was really impressed when I heard the preacher preaching this morning about it, and it really got me to thinking about really one of the most powerful reasons, one of the most powerful evidences for our faith today. And I hope that it's something that will help you with your faith as well. Thanks for listening. God bless.